I don't know if some of you guys remember, or maybe even some of you took advantage of this during kind of the COVID era of forbearance and options for assistance with your loan, your mortgage, your home mortgage. And I'm starting to see forbearance come back and bite sellers in the butt who didn't fully understand what benefit they were being given and how that impacted them. So, the old adage of if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. I'm really seeing this come into play now. And I think we're going to see this come into play even more so because we're seeing it when people go to sell their homes and they don't have a significant amount of equity in their property. So anybody I have talked to that we've ran into this forbearance issue and now they're selling their home, one, they do not in any way understand what they agreed to. And so I have tried to kind of get to the bottom of what it seems like has happened and talk to some lenders that are experienced and maybe have more understanding of it. So this might not be 100% accurate because sometimes people tell you what loans they took or what seconds they took and they don't fully understand. They just signed some documents. So, first time I ran into this, I had a couple get a hold of me this summer and they wanted to sell a property. And they said, here's what we owe. They had their mortgage statement. And then they said, but we have this second loan. This was their understanding. We have this second non interest bearing loan. It's not on the property. We just have to pay it back when we can. So we can sell the house and then we'll just figure this out later. And they kept mentioning this second loan and it was concerning to me. And so I said, let's get with the title company, let's do a title search and really figure out what's going on. So they had only been in the home for a couple of years, so they did not have very much equity in their home. They had done like an FHA loan, or I can't remember exactly what type of loan they had done. I want to say it was FHA, but they did not have a lot of equity. They had bought high during COVID, so prices were high because interest rates were low, and the home was not in good condition. It needed a lot of work. And so they really would have been kind of getting out by the skin of their teeth after they paid realtors fees. In our market, it's common for buyers to ask for some concessions, especially as we're going into a declining market. And so we really were trying to find out what's their bottom line just to get out from this house. And so she kept talking about the second loan. I think it was like $50,000. And so I get the title company involved because the last thing we want to do is list this house and find out they can't sell it for what they owe on it. And we're thinking maybe short sales an option. We're trying to coordinate with their lender and figure out what we can do. And so we find out that this loan, that to their understanding was a second, that was not on the property, that was a personal loan. It absolutely was on the property. They had done some sort of, I think what happened, and they didn't fully even understand, done some sort of forbearance during COVID. At the end of the day, what happened was they owed so much money on the house because of the second they had taken out. They didn't have the equity. They hadn't been in the property very long. And so ultimately just determined to just let that property go. We got with the lender, filled out a bunch of paperwork, tried to do short sales. I did a lot of documentation for them or with them through their lender, and their lender said, no, we're not going to allow this. So they really had no other choice in their situation with all the other things going on but to let the property go. So I imagine we'll see this once it goes through the rounds of foreclosure and all the processes that have to happen there. We're going to see it pop up on the foreclosure market as an auction. Now, fast forward, I have a home under contract. I am a buyer's agent in that situation, in this situation. The sellers are disclosing that they are in a forbearance, that they are not, or maybe pre-foreclosure. I can't remember what all they gave us information wise, but they were letting everybody know, listen, we want to close. We want to close in a quick timeline because this is our situation. So they really kind of just took the negotiation out and shared, this is where we need to be. And so we get it under contract. I have the buyer client. They're getting the payoff from their lender. We were supposed to close within the next 2 weeks. And the payoff they get is, I think their agent said, like $60,000 higher than they thought that it would be. And so obviously they can't, they don't have the equity. Again, haven't been in the home for that many years, didn't put a huge down payment in it on it. And so what it sounds like is they did a forbearance during COVID and they didn't understand the exact implications of that. And so now when they're going to sell their home, that got tacked onto the back end of their mortgage. and they can't. Unless a short sale is allowed, they, I would assume, are going to just have to let this property go. Now, I don't understand how this keeps happening and people aren't fully understanding what they're signing. So I went and spoke to, I have a friend who's an experienced lender. He's been around forever. And I kind of went and picked his brain about it a little bit. And I said, when they're offering these forbearances to people, are they not explaining what this looks like? And if you're in the real estate industry, I feel like in recent years there's been such a push publicly for transparency with agents. My understanding as a broker and a real estate broker, not a mortgage broker, is I think there's such a lack of transparency on the mortgage and lending side. They can charge whatever, you can put a fee in and call it something, and they're all so different. I feel like people don't understand when you go to a lender and a lender says, here's your interest rate, and another lender says, here's your interest rate. And they think the second one's better because the interest rate is better, but they don't understand that they're buying points. And they'll take these fees and they'll charge them up front, or they'll fold them into the loan. And unless you're being really scrupulous and you're looking at the documentation and you understand it, because if you're not used to looking at it, it can be hard to understand. But or if your lender is trying to kind of like bait and switch, like, the cup game where you have the cups and you mix them up and you pick what's under the cup. I feel like there's a lot of leeway where lenders cannot be transparent if they choose not to. So really, all this forbearance stuff, to me, it seems like a lot of these lenders gave this option to people. I have talked, and the lenders I've talked to have told me they have talked to so many people that had their jobs that were making good pay throughout COVID, and they just stopped paying because their lender said, hey, you don't have to pay for a while. I have heard so many people say that, and they didn't understand. And again, I'm trying to figure this out, piecing it backwards now that we're running into it more. You don't pay your payment for this period they tell you don't have to, and they tack it on to the end of your loan. But it's also accruing interest during the period you're not paying. And I don't know what that rate is. I'm sure it's in whatever documentation you e-signed and agreed to that you just scribbled through and didn't read and no one explained to you. But so not only is the amount of principal and interest, that monthly payment you didn't pay for however long they let you not pay it, tacked on the end of your loan, but so is the interest they charged you. So we're seeing people come to closing and they literally can't close, or they can't sell their houses, and they're upside down on their houses because of this forbearance. Now, some people I'm talking to, they literally were working. They didn't even need it. There was no counseling about, should you be using forbearance? Should you not be using forbearance? Was this right for you at this time? They were just making it available to people, and homeowners were taking advantage of it. Now, in this case, unless a short sale is allowed, these people are not going to be able to sell this property. They are already in a tough spot where I think they're just going to have to, if they can't get an option from their lender, let this property go into foreclosure. The problem is they fully didn't understand what they had, I'm guessing, signed and agreed to until the 11th hour, when it had a huge impact on them and the person buying their house. Now, here's the other one. The lender I was talking to, asking questions, and had he ran into it, he said that he has been at many closings where he's at the closing table, because you have the buyers and the sellers. He's the buyer's lender, and the sellers all of a sudden are pissed, which I don't think that the first time you should be seeing your settlement statement and understanding your numbers is at the closing table, but that's not a scenario I'm in. He's just the lender for the buyer. And sellers are pissed because they see that final payoff and they don't understand why they're walking away with so little money. Now, at least in those situations, they can sell. It's eating into their equity that they thought they had, because these forbearances, they're not showing up on your payoff when you get your mortgage statement every month and it says, here's what you owe. They're tacking it on, at least the things I'm seeing from the title companies, as a second, and they're recording it with the county. So when you're tracking what you owe, they're not even like, hey, let's add that back in, so that number you see every month when you get that statement, you have some understanding. They're just recording a second lien against your property. And so I have now just only ran into this twice. I've heard of a couple people, not that it makes their closings not happen, but has an impact on sellers' walkaway number when they sell a property. But I think we're going to see this more, because it's going to impact sellers' ability to sell or desire to sell if they're not going to have the equity that they thought they had to move on and take that next step and make that next decision. We're only running into it. And as a broker, I'm only running into it as people go to sell their homes, because they don't understand until it actually has a tangible impact on them. So I think this is something we're going to see more. And even if you took that forbearance and you sell your house in 10 years and you pay it back on the back end, we're going to be running into this for years to come. So I think it's a really important question. I know a lot of the title companies are asking sellers, did you take or are you in a forbearance? But I think agents, when you're going to list a property, or if you're an investor and you're buying from somebody who's right on the edge of being able to get out from under it, to have that conversation if they had a forbearance, so you can have title check early so you know if this is something that you might be running into. I think we have not seen the end of this now that we are now seeing these people that bought these homes use the forbearance and are now selling. We're seeing the start of it. And I think that this is going to trail for a really long time, where this is something we see that impacts sellers, and I don't think we're talking about it yet because we haven't ran into it that much. So ask, if you're buying a fixer upper, if you're buying something where someone's on pre foreclosure or they're on the edge of losing the home, or if you're a listing agent, or maybe if you're a buyer, have your listing agent check, like, hey, did they do a forbearance? Is our payoff accurate? Do we know that this doesn't have an impact here? So something new to be cautious and careful of when you're on your real estate journey.